Our last presentation of the night is, well, the day is going to be getting out of movement jail. We've talked about movement today. We're going to talk more about it, understanding how to negotiate mobility. All right, Dr. Tim Rivotto is one of our favorite speakers, a very energetic physical therapist coming up from the north, enjoying the southern weather. Really great mind. I'd like to welcome to the stage and tell us how to get out of movement jail, Doc.
All right, thanks, Lance. Let's have some fun, guys. It's a great time to be in the golf industry, right? It's a great time to watch professional golf. We got so many good swings out there, and they're all really, really different, right? So we just heard Dave Phillips talk about John Rahm, some of the limitations he has, also some of the benefits he has with his wrist mobility, upper back mobility. We got the classics. We have the Rory McIlroys, who really load those hips and let them fire. We've got the DJs who can basically, they can turn those shoulders, 180 degrees. I mean, DJ is basically an owl. And then some of my favorites, Minwoo Lee. I think I go to bed every night dreaming of Minwoo Lee hitting 2-iron stingers. It's just something that really, really helps me sleep well at night, keeps the nightmares away. And all these guys have one thing in common. They work on their mobility. They check their mobility week to week after every tournament, and they're really diligent about it. So not only do they check on it, I mean, some of them have really rare mobility, like a DJ, like I just talked about. He can turn his shoulders like no other. But one thing that a lot of our young players have is uncontrolled mobility. One thing our older guys have is some tightness that's popping up. They've got some scar tissue from old injuries. They got some scar tissue in their brains from old injuries. And we want to talk a little bit today just about how we can kind of shed that scar tissue, get you out of movement jail. All right? And I have to apologize a little bit to you guys too, because I'm a physical therapist. Some of the doctors that I work with, some of the physical therapists I've worked with in the past, they've kind of put you in this movement jail. Right? After you had an injury, some of them have told you, never flex your spine again. Never rotate your spine again. It's the worst thing you could do. And I mean, we're all golf nuts. Like, we got to do that, man. We got to be able to flex and extend. We got to be able to rotate. Like, that's super necessary. So I want to describe to you the body kind of like those college groups that we all probably hated. I know I hated them, right? You get paired up with 3 or 4 different people. You meet the first time and you're like, oh yeah, you take this piece. All right, great. I'll do that piece. We'll meet in a couple weeks. We'll put it all together. It'll be great. We'll get an A. I don't know about your groups, but for me, that never happens. All right? I was the guy. I'm a geek. I was the guy sitting there. Yep, I got my piece. We meet in 2 or 3 weeks. I've done it. Then I got 3 other schlubs staring at me like, you gonna get us that A? You ready? I'm like, God, why can't everyone just do their work? Then I'm staying up late, I'm pulling an all-nighter, I'm doing it, and we're getting the job done. Your body's the same way, right? We've got areas that naturally, they move really easily and really smoothly. Okay, when we're upstairs, a lot of times that's our shoulders, right? Shoulders are basically a golf ball on a tee, and they rotate all over the place. They can move every direction. And they'll do it if you ask them to. But they like to have a little help. They like that upper back extending and flexing. They like that upper back to rotate as your arms reaching across your body. So your shoulders need some help. Upper back is a little stiffer than most areas, right? Because you got important stuff under there. You got your lungs, you got your heart, your liver. If we have an injury to one of those, it's bad news. It's over. No more golf. So we need to share the load upstairs. Downstairs, we got to do the same thing. Low back typically can move pretty well. We got big, strong muscles. All right? Low back's really easy to extend, to flex. It rotates a little bit. It can side bend pretty good. But again, it's that workhorse in the group. You have 3 or 4 group projects in a semester, you're going to get tired, you're going to get run down, you're going to get sick. And that's when injuries pop up. We get disc injuries, nerve injuries, joint pain, muscle spasms, you name it. So those lazy schlubs downstairs usually are our pelvis, right? The bone that sits right beneath our low back and kind of supports us there, and then our hips. Hips are really close to the shoulders though, guys. They're ball and sockets. They can rotate, they can flex, they can extend, they can go in and out. But it's a little deeper socket. You got a little more tissue around there, kind of bigger muscles. Pelvis, same thing. Your pelvis can extend and flex, it can rotate. It's just harder to do. They're smaller muscles. It's not as easy for your brain to make that connection. Okay? So we've got to find a way when we're doing any of our stretching, any of our mobility work, get the lazy guys doing a little more, and get those workhorses, give them a chance to just kind of take a back seat and do less. This isn't going to be a straight up stretching protocol or specific mobility exercises. All right, I'm going to share a couple with you here and there. Really, it's the three keys that I think are going to be good no matter what stretching program, yoga, Pilates, mobility exercises, whatever you're doing. All right, this applies to it all. So let's jump into it. Number one, we start where we start any good golf lesson, or at least any good golf lesson I've had, is we just look at our setup, right? You get a player in, you have them hit a couple balls in front of you, you're looking at how they set up, right? How do they grip the club? Where's their ball position? What's their setup posture like? Okay? We do the same thing with stretching and with mobility. I tell people, hey, let's do a hip flexor stretch. Get down on one knee. Instantly, I'm looking at their setup. How wide are they? How short are they? Are they arching through their back? And then we're going to make some small changes to their setup. Because setup matters a lot. I don't know if any of you have followed Jason Day over the last maybe 5 years. Poor guy has dealt with a lot of back pain up until really last year was his first full year where he played really well and he made some good changes. If you look at his older swings, 5-6 years ago, he sets up really flexed at the knees, and that's going to limit your ability to rotate through your hips, through your pelvis. It's going to make you have to side bend a little more when you're rotating into impact. That's going to crunch down the right side of your back. It can piss off your nerves, your discs, your joints. So if you look at him now, he's a little more upright. He's in a good hinge position where his hamstrings, his hips, they're supporting him all the way up. And that hinge is going to help your hurt. So if you're in a hinge position and you're really extended in your back, that's going to hurt. If you're set up with a lot of knee flex, even if you're nice and neutral in your spine posture, it's probably going to cause some hurt. So when we set up for our stretching, we're trying to target these tight areas so that you can get in a good hinge over the golf ball, maintain that hinge as you rotate back and rotate through. We, in setup, do a lot of the same stuff swing coaches do. We use training aids and tools for stretches. So if I go into anyone's teaching bay, I bet you have 6, 12, 18 different swing aids, right? You got the Total Golf Trainer, you got the Pro Sender, you got alignment sticks, pool noodles, all of that stuff. In the gym, or in the PT clinic, our biggest training aids are the floor and the wall. Or we use the squat rack a lot too. That basically doubles as a wall, all right? If we're looking at someone who rotates through their back, I'm going to take one of my clients, Larry, for example. Okay, Larry's in his mid-60s. He's been training for a long time, training for over 30 years. And he's a really, really smart guy. He's a trademark attorney. But Larry gets really tilty in his swing, all right? So he has a hard time just turning without a lot of tilt. And you guys, as swing coaches know, that's going to change up your low point. It's going to cause really inconsistent strikes. And he was struggling with that. So Larry does all his strength stuff, and then he's got a couple mobility drills at the end to work on his hip rotation. One of them, I think Lance shared a video of this one last week on TPI, but one of them we get people sitting on the ground, and then they just rotate their knees back and forth. And we're trying to just get them moving from the hips. Well, I see Larry doing this one day, and I've got 5 other people in the gym, so I'm not necessarily Hawkeye on him, but I see him doing something weird. I'm like, hey man, what are you doing? He goes, oh, I'm working on my hip rotation, bro. What do you mean? I was like, all right, keep going, Larry, keep going. I'm gonna take a video and show you. So take out my phone, take a video. And he's sitting there, he's just whipping his knees side to side as fast as he can. She's like, speed is better, right? I'm like, no. And he's just side bending. So he's doing his tilt. We know he can tilt. We see him tilt in his golf swing every day, but he can't move from his hips and his pelvis. So for Larry this day, because it was a busy gym, we didn't have anywhere to go, I just grabbed his rib cage, right? I got right behind him. I put my knees on either side of his ribs. I put my hands on his ribs, and I said, all right, rotate and do it slow. Because your setup is terrible right now, man. You're just set up to tilt. So we did it a couple times. Anytime he side bent, I just dug my fingers in there, man, because that tactile feedback, it works. Okay, now I can't do that every time, right? So we realized that wasn't a great exercise for Larry, so we changed it up. Another way we can work on our hip rotation is we can just use the wall, right? So I'll use this pole here as an example. We have him lean into it, push, and then chest stays square to that pole. And we're just turning the belt buckle back and forth. We're not trying to extend and arch the back and get as much rotation as we can. We want this clean setup, and I just want that belt buckle to be a lighthouse, right? I just want it moving as far as it can without dumping into extension, without tilting, without turning your chest with it. The setup is so key to make sure we get movement from our target area. All right. Another one we work on all the time is upper back rotation, right? I mentioned that's kind of a schlub. It doesn't necessarily help the shoulders out all the time. And if someone can't rotate through their upper back and extend through their upper back, that lead arm is going to have to reach all the way across their chest. That's going to put a lot of strain on your rotator cuff, on your labrum. It might last for a little bit, but I'll tell you, if you're playing a 3-day member guest, you're playing a lot of tournaments, hitting a lot of balls on the range, your shoulder's going to start to bark at you. So when we look at upper back rotation, a lot of times I just bring people to the ground because you can feel the ground, and that ground isn't moving anywhere, right? So we get down on our hands and knees, and I tell them, hey, pressure between your knees, constant. I don't want you tilting one way or the other. Get your butt on both heels. No tilting off your heels. And then the third one is shoulder's not doing all the work here. We're not flying away. We're keeping that shoulder pinned to our rib cage, and we're turning. So there, they got 3 external cues. They've got their knees on the ground. They've got their butt on their heels. They've got their elbow on their rib cage. And we're getting the rotation from where we want to get it. All right? If any of these, I said external cue, if any of these are sounding unfamiliar, make sure you come to my partner Duffy's talk tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. He's going to talk all about cueing, how to pick the right cue for the right person. All right? Larry's an auditory guy and a feel guy, so I was like, boom, I got to give Larry the pole. I got to tell him to keep his chest, and he likes to get out on the beach and ride around in his boat, so I was like, hey dude, lighthouse, let's move that lighthouse. Clicked for him, set up, cleaned up. He hasn't gotten to take his changes out on the course yet because we're from Boston and it's cold and we're playing a lot of simulator golf right now, but he's playing well in the sim, so now we got to bring it outside. So number 1, set up for success. If you don't set up right, that's like having the guy that comes to you and is like, oh, I love to play a cut. But a lot of times I push the ball, and then a lot of times I end up hitting this low hook that's just a screamer left. And then you get them over the ball, and it's like, hey, that ball is way in the back of their stance. It's hard to play a cut from the back of your stance, right? We got to change our setup and get you in a good place. So set up for success. Number 2, I mentioned the hip flexor stretch, right? We don't do a ton of stretching in our gym. We're more of an active, we do the strength, the speed, and then our mobility piece is usually something active. But we had this one guy, Sean, he was a college hockey player. So really competitive guy, finance guy, and he gets after it. I'm talking like gets after it in the gym. but he's tight in the front of his hips, right? So he tends to early extend because that trail side is super tight. I got him on the treatment table, tried to get his leg behind him. That thing isn't going anywhere. It's like here, and then he's just all back. So I'm like, Sean, we got to stretch out your hips, man. You're a hockey guy. You're used to being hinged over and skating. You're not used to being upright and extended through your hips. He's like, oh yeah, I've been doing hip flexor stretches since I was in college. I got this. It's like, all right, show me. So he gets down on one knee, and I'm telling you, he's probably, I can't even do it. I don't think I can get that far wide. But he's here, and I'm telling you, he is like, he's gritting his teeth. He's turning red, veins popping out of his neck. It's like, I'm like, dude, first off, you gotta relax, man. Like, I don't know where you guys are from. In Massachusetts, we have legal weed. I was like, dude, here's a gummy. Let's take one, and let's just chill, man. Like, let's relax. So first we tweaked his setup, right? Because that's where we start. We got him a little narrower. And I was like, Sean, I want you to just feel the front of your hip, and I want it tight. When he was out here, he was like, yeah, I'm feeling it in my hip, but I'm like, my back's getting a little tight. I'm getting like, I feel like a spasm's coming on. I'm like, yeah, no duh. Like, you are so arched, you're just stretching your back extension. You're not getting this hip at all. So we cleaned his setup up. The second thing we had him do, like I just said, relax. He wasn't breathing. You could see it. I mean, I'm telling you, it's beet red. Breathing while you're doing any of these drills is super, super important. When you take a breath in, right, deep breath in, muscles get a little tense, heart rate goes up a little bit, your nervous system's kind of on edge. You breathe out, muscles relax a little bit, right? Heart rate comes down a little bit. We can sink into that stretch a little further, or whatever mobility drill we're doing. So in our gym, we prescribe stretches or mobility drills for breaths, right? If I'm having someone do a hip flexor stretch, you're getting down in the right setup, and you're doing it for 10 to 15 breaths. I don't care if that takes 90 seconds. I don't care if it takes 5 minutes because you're breathing slow. But I need you breathing, especially breathing out, to relax those muscles, get some length in those tissues, and actually do something to affect the tissue. Because if you're just taking a big breath in like Sean, and then you're straining and pulling and just going after it, it's basically the equivalent if I gave you a steel shafted club, right? And I said, hey, I need this thing to be 2 inches longer. Can you just like do that with your hands? And you're like, you could sit there all day and pull. You're not going to get two more inches out of that shaft. So, long story short, Sean started breathing, started getting the setup right. 2 weeks later, he can get that thing, that right hip 10 degrees behind him, right? So he can maintain his good hinge. He no longer has to just extend his spine and bring his hips into the ball, early extend. His right side of back pain is starting to go away. He can clear his hips. His hip flexor let go because he actually breathed and let it relax. So we've got to do our setup. We've got to breathe. We've got to relax. Third thing we have to do is we've got to use a little bit of trickery for our brain here, okay? Because I mentioned really early on, but we've all got a little bit of scar tissue, right? We've had injuries and probably have literal scar tissue. We also have brain scar tissue. Your brain, the number one goal, brain is trying to keep your head upright, your eyes forward, because that means everything's good, right? Otherwise, you're probably on the ground or something bad happened. No one wants to fall, no one wants to do anything like that. Your brain and your nervous system also remember all your past injuries, right? So if you tore your rotator cuff 20 years ago when you were playing college baseball, it's healed by now. You've strengthened it, you've done all the PT. Your brain's still got a little something in the back of the mind that's like, hey, remember that? Remember when that happened and we used that shoulder too much and then it got painful and we couldn't throw for 6 months? And it's always working in the background. So we've got to use this trickery. We've got to get your body and your brain to understand, hey, it's safe to move that way. You heard Dave mention it in one of the questions he got, right? People that have knee replacements, hip replacements, their brain doesn't necessarily understand, hey, we don't have that arthritis anymore. It's gone. They shaved that thing out. They hammered a new joint in that socket. That thing can move now. We've just got to teach it how to move, right? So I want to see anyone in the crowd have tight shoulders. We can do it. We'll do a quick test. So bring your hands up horizontal. We're gonna do a quick 90-90 test. All right. This is a TPI. Like first day, everyone gets this. Rotate your hands up. All right, you guys are pretty good. A little tight on the right here. A little tight on the left over here. All right. So bring your hands back down. Anyone that was tight, try this again. Everyone can try it. I want you to take, especially the right one here and the left one over here. Bring that arm across. Bring your forearm over your head. Drop that elbow down. Boom. We definitely got more here. Still a little tight over here, but we got a little work to do. That was a quick 2-second drill. So what did we do there? I didn't have you hold a stretch. I didn't have you push against anything. I didn't put needles in you, which I love to do, by the way. Dry needling is fantastic. All we did was trick your brain, right? So something in your brain said, hey, rotate that shoulder up. And it was like, no, we don't want to quite go that far. Your brain doesn't know, though, that bringing it across, up, and down is basically just taking 3 rights to make a left-hand turn, right? And we can do this all over the body. Shoulders is the easiest to demo. The other one I use all the time, is hamstrings, because everyone comes to me and complains about their hamstrings. They get into that hinge position. Usually, they're in a lot of S posture here, and their hamstrings just feel tight. They've just got to tuck their hips a little, and then they're like, oh yeah, I don't feel those anymore. But one of the tests we do in the physical therapy clinic is straight leg raise, right? So everyone's probably seen it or done it. Keep your legs straight, lift it up as high as you can. Stop when your knee bends or your back arches off the ground. Most people that come in can probably get to 50, 60 degrees, and then that hamstring screaming at them. So the way we can make a quick change, just like we did with your shoulder, is we get a band hooked up. So it's something like this. We just loop it around the squat rack, and typically I won't even tell people what we're doing. I'll just program this in their workout somewhere as like a core drill, because it feels like you're just using your abs. You lay on the ground, pull that thing over your head, and then all you got to do is lift. And I'd say 90% of people, once they just pull against that band, boom, leg gets up to about 90 degrees, pointing straight at the ceiling. And again, we didn't make their hamstrings 2 inches longer. All we did was trick the brain. So muscles are just electrical circuits, right? Brain to spinal cord, nerves down into the muscle, boom. Things contract, things relax. For the most part, this is a really simplified version, but for the most part, muscles on the front, muscles on the back, they're linked and opposite, right? So when you contract something on the front of your body, take your elbow, right? You bend your elbow up, bicep is active, that tricep has to relax. Same thing here. All we did was get you contracting your abs, those are on the front of your body. Back of the body has to relax a little bit, and as an added benefit, your brain's probably thinking, hey, we got to keep this band against the ground. It's not even thinking about that tight hamstring and lifting that leg. So we just use a little trickery, and we kind of play with the brain and get it to trust, hey, we're doing something totally different, even though it's actually the same. Right? So we set up for success. We breathe, we relax, take it easy. We've already done our strength training, right? We've already done our speed training. Stretching, mobility, we're trying to relax. We're trying to get the body to just calm down. And then we just use a little trickery, and we use the brain and hijack it a little bit to get it to trust that, hey, we can get there, and it's not going to happen overnight, but you can make some quick change if you just trick the brain a little bit. So we've got all these older guys, right? Podrick, Phil Mickelson, even not the gold standard of health and wellness, but like a John Daly. that guy can still wrap the club around his neck, take a full backswing, and then let that thing fly, right? And I'm not saying like you got to become a degenerate gambler or anything like that to get good mobility. But you got to work on things, okay? One thing that these guys all share is they check. Charlie Hoffman said last week he checks after every tournament. He gets on the ground and checks his hip rotation. And oh, you know what? My right one's a little tight after that. You know, I made the cut. I played 4 days in a row. Right hip's a little tight. I got to focus on that this week. And then he makes sure he cleans up his swing and he cleans up his mobility restrictions. But they all focus on their setup. They all breathe while they're doing this stuff. They've got great trainers like Spencer and Dave and all those guys. And they're tricking their brain and doing a little bit of different mobility, different exercise, right? Because again, your body is essentially a well-run country club, right? You've got the head pro doing his thing. You've got the assistants in the shop and the director of instruction doing his thing and running that side of the house. You got the superintendent out taking care of the grounds and making sure everything's good out there. And then if they're all working and doing their job, you've got a great product. Your club members are really happy. Same thing in the body, right? If that lower back's doing too much, that's like the grounds crew just kind of didn't show up this week. They let the course go to hell. People are pissed. Your low back gets pissed. So tight areas, upper back, pelvis. Focus on those. Really mobile areas, we got to let relax and kind of calm down. Shoulders, low back. All right? And I want to leave you with one last thing before I go here today, is you've got to give this stuff time. Okay? We can get someone pretty strong in 8 weeks. We can get someone a little bit faster if they do a stack program for 8 weeks, 12 weeks. But mobility didn't develop, or your mobility restrictions didn't develop just because you took a week off and sat on the couch, right? They developed over time. Your 30-minute commute to work, you're sitting taking calls for 8 hours. You drive home, you're sitting Netflix and chilling after work. Your mobility restrictions came up over years. So take the time, just like a swing change, right? Swing change takes about 18 months to really show up when you're under pressure, when you're under the gun. Make sure you take the time, breathe and relax, and put in the work. All right? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rivotto. Anybody have any questions?